to you. Good morning, good morning. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good good morning to you. You. Good morning, good morning to you and many more. Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome, welcome, welcome to Daring Dialogues Black Table Talk. I am your host, Shantae Charles. Today, I was going to get back into our reading, Rock My Soul, Black People and Self-Esteem by Bell Hooks. However, I'm taking a pause because there has been a conversation happening online, and I have been asked to sort of talk about it a little bit, give some potential resources, and I really think that this is actually going to take up most of my talking time today. So I'm going to just dive right into it. And so this is a talk, this is a book recommendation um, centering around African Americans, the Black church, Christianity, its African origins or not its African origins. Um, there's been a lot of talk about whether or not our ancestors um, were just beaten into, tortured into, driven into a sort of what we would call today a Western or Eurocentric Christianity. Um, a lot of our ancestors were. That is very true. I am not doubting that. I'm not refuting that. From what I've read, a lot of our ancestors did experience that. What I am wanting to hopefully bring a little bit of perspective to is the fact that we also had ancestors um, that were introduced to Christianity pre colonial. And some of those ancestors did wind up being enslaved and coming to the Americas. Um, and so to have this streamlined narrative that all Black people who are practicing Christianity in the United States are practicing quote unquote the slave master's religion is just not fully true. Okay. So I'm not refuting that, yes, there is a slave master Christianity. There was even a slave Bible. You can go and read articles and all of that on it. What I am saying is, I think sometimes we don't give our ancestors enough credit for what they did know. We don't give our ancestors enough credit sometimes for um, some of them having their own spiritual practices and continuing those things in secret. We do give that credit, however, to people who practiced Judaism secretly while being under the control and oppression of others. That is well documented that people hid um, their practice of Judaism while being conquered or while being taken into another country or space or whatever. I don't think we give our ancestors enough credit to have practiced their own spiritual beliefs while being told what they must follow, right, in the space of colonized in early America. And so, what I want to challenge people to do is number one, I want to challenge you to go and read some of the enslaved narratives. Now, I'm going to show you two books, both of them which I have read in full. One is called River of Blood, American Slavery from the People Who Lived It. Okay, these are their personal documented accounts. And these documented accounts were from the Federal Writers Project of the Works Progress Administration from 1936 to 1938. The entire collection, which is not this is part of the collection. It's a really good part. Um, but the entire collection from 17 states includes more than 2,000 interviews with formerly enslaved persons before they died. And I would tell anybody that if you want a snapshot, right, because of the millions of persons who were enslaved, this is really a snapshot. You want a little snapshot of their life, their practices, how they were treated, what they ate, their spiritual practices. Some of them notate that. I would encourage you to get this and read it. Now, I like this particular um, recent release because this one actually comes with photographs of the formerly enslaved persons who allowed them to photograph them, and it's all throughout. And then on one side, it gives their narrative, what they were willing to share. The interesting thing about this particular narrative is um, a lot of them passed away right after they gave their interview. It was almost like a spiritual kind of release for them to finally have their story told and enshrined for generations to come. Now, go check your local library because this may not even be in there. You can request it for your library, of course, but this may not even be in here, in there. Why? Because we have so many states that are literally banning our history in real time. And this is literally the voices of our ancestors telling you before they passed away what their life was like in enslavement. And again, you can find some of this online, but it is the Federal Writers Project of the Works Progress Administration for a period from 1936 to 1938. They went to 17 states and documented those who were formerly enslaved and what they wanted to share about their stories. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this book up is because, again, people have this idea and this notion that either the enslaved were just going along with whatever the slave masters told them, or they were not aware that the Christianity that they were being told was incorrect or wrong. Many of them, like we do, like some of us do in our life, we just nod our heads when we realize people are saying something ridiculous and we don't want to argue. We just nod our heads and go about our business. Well, many of them did that. They recognized that what they were being told was a lie. Now, you can also purchase these. No, it was, oh, it was most certainly not just the South. You can also purchase these by state. So the very first one, before I found that one, because that one is a newer compilation than this, the very first one I got was Maryland. Okay. And this is pretty much what the books look like. As you can see, they're not very big. They're easy to read. You could probably read it in one day if you're not emotionally traumatized by the time you read some of these stories. But you could probably get through it in one day to read it. But this is Maryland's accounts of slave narratives, okay? And I'm just going to read you an excerpt from one of them because the point I'm making is we act like they did not understand spirituality. We act like they did not have a sense that what they were being told about Christianity or about the faith was not true and not right. So I'm going to read you from Parson Resin Williams. He was a formerly enslaved man. This was documented, I think it says 1937 from him. So this is his personal interview Thursday afternoon, September 18th and September 24th, 1937 at his home. They have the address down here of where he lived. And at the time, he was recorded as the oldest living Negro Civil War veteran. So at the time that they took this man's story, he was 115 years old. 115 years old. Okay. He was the oldest registered voter in Maryland at the time and said to be the oldest freeman in the United States. Okay. He was said to be the oldest member of the Negro family in America with sister and brother who was still living, more than a century old. Now, this is really powerful. His father worked for George Washington. You know, the same president, George Washington, who spent many, many years trying to recapture, I think her name was Oni or Ona Judge, the enslaved woman that escaped, managed to escape. Well, his father worked for George Washington. All right. So this is his story here. This is what he says. Parson Williams, serving the Union forces as a teamster, hauled munitions and supplies for General Grant's army at Gettysburg. On tripe to the rear, he conveyed wounded soldiers from the line and to return them to their cabins. Parson remembered familiar old spirituals, including Roll the Stones Away, You'll Rise in the Skies, and Ezekiel Eyes Coming Home. And they actually document the lyrics to the spirituals that he remembered. Okay. Interesting reminiscences are recalled by Parson Williams of his early life. He said that he still remembers when Mr. Odin Bowie, later governor, left with the Army of Invasion of Mexico, and in his being brought home ill and after several years was nursed back to health at Fairview. Governor Bowie died on his plantation in 1894 and is buried in the family burying ground there. He was the first president of the Maryland Jockey Club. Governor Bowie raised a long stream of famous racehorses that became known throughout the country. So he's 115 years old, and he's able to recall, number one, his father worked for George Washington, and number two, this Governor Bowie. Now, the one that I'm reading from those who are coming in, is the Slave Narratives of Maryland, which is the state I happen to be in. And his name is, I'll give it to you again. His name was Parson Rezin, Rezin Williams, a formerly enslaved man. All right. Now, I want to go to where he says, what he says about what they told them about their faith. I want to make sure I am not skipping over it. Where is it? There we go. He recalls many interesting incidents during slavery days. He said that enslaved persons could not buy or sell anything except with the permission of their master. If a slave was caught 10 miles from his master's home and had no signed permit, he was arrested as a runaway and harshly punished, sometimes branded with an R. Yeah, there's that. There was a standing reward for the capture of a runaway. The Indians who caught a runaway enslaved received a match coat. So he's now also implicating in Maryland the Indians who were also a part of slave catching. Where's that movie? hmm The master gave the slave or 90 lashes with a rawhide whip, and sometimes they were unmercifully flogged until unconscious. Some cruel masters believed that Negroes had no souls. I'm going to say that again. He's not telling you what he believes. He's telling you what was the theological standpoint of why they were doing this to people. He's telling you some cruel masters believed that Negroes had no souls. The enslaved at Bowie, however, declared Parson Williams were pretty well treated and usually respected. He said that the enslaved at Bowie mostly lived in cabins made of slabs running up and down and crudely furnished. Working time was from sunrise until sunset. The enslaved had no money to spend, and few masters allowed them to indulge in a religious meeting or even learn about the Bible. So I need people to get their story straight. There was not this big, oh, we're going to indoctrinate you with the Bible. No, that's not what was really happening. Now, many of the enslaved were secretly learning how to read, the Bible, and I'm going to say in English, because when we hear these stories, we often say, oh, they couldn't read, oh, they couldn't write. No, they couldn't read or write English. These people came from highly organized societies that already had languages. So they could not read English or write English. But to just say they did not know how to read or write is also not true. Okay? So they were not allowed, this is in Bowie, Maryland, by the way. They were not allowed to indulge in a religious meeting or even learn about the Bible. This is from a 115-year-old formerly enslaved person telling you. So who am I going to believe? Am I going to believe his account? Or am I going to believe people running around saying that they were just beating us over the head with Bibles and forcing with him? Okay? The enslaved received medical attention from a physician if they were seriously ill. When a death occurred, a rough box would be made of heavy slabs and the dead Negro buried the same day on the plantation, burying Lot with a brief ceremony, if any. The grieving darkies, relatives, after he was eased in the ground, would sing a few spirituals and return to their cabins. Okay? So they knew, they were aware of how they were talked about. They were aware that people didn't think they had a soul, so they could justify the inhumane treatment that was being done to them. They knew they had a soul, but they were quite aware that other people, that was the framework of what was being done to them. Oh, they don't have a soul. Therefore, why would we preach salvation to them if we don't even think they have a soul? Remember, it's souls that are saved. Okay? You get later with the thing of with the great awakening in America, where they say, oh, well, we can tell them, they have a soul, so now we'll save their soul, but their body can still be enslaved. So that's how a lot of the Christian preachers of that time justified keeping them enslaved, because they came up with their own doctrine saying it was a disembodied doctrine. Your soul can be saved, but your body remains mine. Your body remains in captivity with me. So again, let's pay attention and be careful of the narratives that we are putting out here about Black people. All right. Now, the other one I've heard about, of course, is the KJV. Now, if you don't know, I'm not knocking anybody who reads the KJV, but if you don't know, there was a set of men that sat down and got together, and these were not just your regular men. These were higher, upper echelon men in religious streams, I'll put it that way. And some of those streams had doctrines that went against each other. And King James got these men together, this council of men, and he said, I need to have a translation that essentially doesn't disagree with your doctrine over here and doesn't disagree with your doctrine over here. Because sometimes I hear a lot of times people say, well, you can read this and you can justify what's happening, or you can read this and you can justify this. Well, that was one of the intents of how the King James Version was translated. It was translated so people who had arguments with each other could, all of them could go from the same text and use the same text to justify their own positions, even though they had theological, doctrinal issues with each other. Okay? Now, if you want to learn more about that, because I don't have time, but we have read part of this in another season. We did spend some time reading part of this in another season. This is called God's Secretaries, the making of the King James Bible. I will say that some of the English in here, because it's got some old English writing in here, but If you want to understand how the King James Bible was made, who was involved in it, why did they do certain things to the text, why does some of the text seem so anti-woman, get this book. Get this book. And also, words like slave and master don't come into play until you really get to the King James Version of the Bible. Now go think about that. And why would they need to insert slave and master in this Bible that they released in the early 1600s? Like slaves obey your master. Why would they need to put that in there? And as we talked about, um, formerly enslaved persons, right? I think one of the most famous that most of us know about is Nat Turner, right? I want to encourage you to get this set of books. And the reason why I say that is because in Rest Her Soul, Sharon Ewell Foster, Sharon Ewell Foster did the digging. She did the historical research. She went to the towns. She went to the courthouses. She read the original records of Nat Turner's trial. And what she found in that was what led her to this series of works. Now, she turned what she found in the works into this fictional series, which, by the way, became part of the framework for the movie on Nat Turner that starred, I think his name was Nate. I can't remember his last name. Um, but her work became the subtext for that movie. Um, in this, when she read the trial records, um, she realized that he never confessed, according to the court records. He never confessed. Um, so she labels it as the truth that has been buried more than 100 years. She found Bible, his Bible, and safely delivered it to the National Museum of African American History and Culture here in Washington, D.C. So when it comes to the subject of Nat Turner, this is who I look to because she actually did the work, solid research, courthouse documentation, talking to his descendants, all of that good stuff. And this is really kind of an ode and an honor to Nat Turner's legacy and his family's legacy. So if you want to know what really went down with Nat Turner, um, I suggest these two parts, part one, part two. And she passed away before she really saw, um, I feel like, the culmination of the importance and the impact of this work. Also, because I know that we have the legacy of Hotepian Utubians out in the world, I want to also point you to some peer reviewed work on Black church, African American churches, a history of Christianity in Africa, and some more books. All right. These are, again, research peer reviewed books. So um, they are a little bit pricey if you're trying to order them online. I order a lot of my books used rather than brand new. This one is The History and Heritage of African American Churches, A Way Out of No Way by L.H. Welchel Jr. As you can see, it has been removed from this library because, again, our history is being removed in real time. Another resource, The Talking Book, African Americans and the Bible by Alan Dwight Callahan. All right. And this is Yale University Press. Okay. I will try to do that. Authentically Autistic, I will try to do that. This is African American Religious History, Documentary Witnesses. So this is a collection of documents that offers a view into African American religious history from Africa in early America all the way through Reconstruction to the rise of Black nationalism, civil rights, and the Black theology of today. So if you're looking for documents, this is going to be the one that you might want to check out and pick up. The Black Church in the African American Experience by C. Eric Lincoln and Lawrence Lamaya. This is Duke University Press. And this one here is also Duke University Press. All right. A History of Christianity in Africa. This is written by a young woman out of New Zealand. A History of Christianity in Africa. Okay. Now, one of my favorites that I have been diving into because I sing and I'm trying to get more back into hymns and spirituals and gospel songs and the history part of it. This is African American Heritage Hymnal, which has 575 hymns, spirituals, and gospel songs. Um, I've been thumbing through here and just thinking about, man, some of these songs I never thought would be in an actual hymnal are actually in an actual hymnal. And I do want to thank Church of God in Christ because a lot of the spirituals and hymns that I learned through the Church of God in Christ. And a lot of them are in here, which is really awesome with, you know, music scores and all of that. They've got scripture references. Um, this comes with a lot, so it's I would say if you are a part of the Black church, you're a musician, singer, you probably want to have this. See how I have tabbed this up? Those are the ones I still have in there. But it's beautiful and it's amazing. So if you are into, like I said, hymns, spiritual songs, gospel, you want this in your personal library. And last but not least, this is Black preachers, Black theologians, etc., who have come together and created an African American New Testament commentary. All right. It's called True to Our Native Land, an African American New Testament commentary. So if you are looking for commentary that's got a lens from Black theologians, I highly recommend this one. All right. Somebody said these are fiction books. I mean, I read fiction too. I read mythology. I've been actually looking a little bit at Medusa. Very, very powerful story if you start digging into Medusa. But yeah, so last thing I want to note, because I did notice this, and I'm probably going to have to grab the other book as for a comparison for you. So because I am an educator in more than one subject, but my primary subject is um, spirituality and arts. And um, I've been doing some lectures with African art lately, so I've been having to dig a little bit more into African art. So I bought some more books specifically geared toward African art. And one thing I noticed is this is a more contemporary book on African art and culture. So this is let's see the dates. So the date on this one is 2004. So it's still, I would say fairly old, but I'm looking through it and I'm just like, oh, this is great. This is wonderful. It's got lovely, colorful maps. It has cut off the Middle East, which is actually Northeast Africa. So I'm not too keen on that. But then I start going and looking at the timeline. So at the bottom of this book, it has, that runs across the bottom of the book, it has a timeline. And I'm looking at the timeline and I see that the timeline jumps from 500 BC, which is the Nok culture, if you're familiar with Nigeria, you know about the Nok culture. It says 500 BC, the Nok culture begins. And then it jumps from 500 BC all the way to 600 AD or CE, depending on who taught you. Okay. So I'm like, okay, 500 BC, 600 AD, Arabs invade North Africa. I'm like, wait a minute. How do we jump from 600 AD, from 500 BC to 600 AD? Before the Arabs invaded North Africa, I know something happened before then. Anybody know what happened before then? Before the Arabs invaded North Africa? I think I think Christianity was happening before that, right? But why isn't it in this contemporary book? How we just skip over that? So we have 800 CE, the kingdom of Ife begins. 1100s, I'm tracking. Okay, the kingdoms of Benin and Ghana and Songhai begin. And then they skip over Ethiopia because they jump to 1200s, kingdom of Mali begins. Well, there was something going on in the 1200s, 1200s there too, and that was Ethiopia. So how are we skipping important things in history, right? I'm just because I took my marker and I started adding it in because I'm like, listen, um, I'm not going to be teaching stuff and just skipping past important things, right? Because it is important to know when the Arabs invaded North Africa. It is important to know when the Kingdom of Mali begins. It is important to know um, when Zimbabwe, the Kingdom of Zimbabwe begins, and the Kingdom of Congo in the 1400s, right? So the Kingdom of Congo begins in the 1400s. The Kingdom of Congo, this is very important, begins in the 1400s. The Kingdom of Congo was a pre colonized group of people that converted to Christianity of their free will. Those people then later became enslaved, and some of those people wound up in the Americas, and we get Congo Christianity, also known as hoodoo. Yeah, so that would be important to know. So then it skips from 1400 Kingdom of Congo to 1450s Portuguese traders arrived in West Africa. Okay, so I want us to understand that the Portuguese traders arriving in West Africa that are going to bring this colonized Christianity, they arrive in the 1450s. But before then, you have the Ethiopian church, you have the Kingdom of Mali. There were Christians there, and then you have what happened before 1600 CE. So to just say that we only have a colonized Christianity is not historically accurate. And then again, this book, let me show you what this book does because I wrote it in. This book skips the transatlantic slave trade. All right. So it goes from 1450s Portuguese traders arrive in West Africa to 1700s, the Asante Empire begins, which we know as Ghana now. And then it says 1880s European countries colonized much of Africa. Oh, they didn't leave that out though. They didn't leave out the fact that Europeans came and colonized Africa. They were proud to print that in the timeline, but they didn't print that the slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade, started in the 1600s. This is why I say, parents, check the books and teach your kids, please, please. Thanks. All right. Now I showed you that because now I said I gotta find another book because this book is tripping on this timeline, and I can't use that when you have that many things just chopped out of the timeline and you're picking and choosing what you want to highlight in the timeline. Are the authors atheists? I am not sure. But if I'm an educator, then I need to be talking about all of the practices that were present. I don't need to be leaving out the Muslims. I don't need to be leaving out the Christians. I don't need to be leaving out the Songhai Empire. I don't need, if I'm going to teach it, then Accuracy is important, right? So here's what I did. I bought another book. This one is World Art Africa, and I went to, see what the print date was on it. And the first printing on this one is 2001. Now that one's 2004. This one's 2001. And I said, okay, let's go to the timeline. And as you can see here, okay, this is a more lengthy and accurate timeline. Now, how did I check the accuracy of this timeline? I started going through and I said, okay, they're talking. I started with the 1100s, right? Because I'm comparing the previous one to this one. 1100s, founding of the Kingdom of Benin, check. 12th through the 16th century, Songhai Empire, check. 13th through the 15th Empire, Mali Empire, okay, check. 14th, 15th, mid-century to mid-17th century, the Kingdom of Congo, check. All right. Now it starts talking more in detail about the Kingdom of Owo, how Benin was expanded, how the Portuguese came in with sugar plantations in other places like Sao Tome. Then it says 1512, Alfonso, king of the Congo, converts to Christianity. Bingo! Accuracy. Because to say that there was nobody converting to Christianity willingly before colonialism is not true. Okay? So, yes, were there colonizers saying, we're going to beat you into this slave version of Christianity, you're going to convert or die? There absolutely was. There absolutely was. But were there also African nations converting to Christianity willingly? There absolutely was. Okay? So if you're going to tell the story, tell the whole story. Don't just tell the part that makes you feel good or validates how you feel about Christianity and Christians. Okay? All right. 1515 to 1540, first missionary phase in Benin. 1525, listen to this. 76,000 enslaved are sent to other regions of Africa and Europe. So you have 1512, the nation converts. 1525, people are starting to be shipped off as enslaved persons. From 1620, black enslaved people began to be sent to North America. Okay. After 1665, the decline of the Kingdom of Congo. Why does the Kingdom of Congo decline? Because their subjects have been enslaved and sent to North America. Okay. Early 18th century, you have Osei Tutu founds the Ashanti Kingdom, and it goes down and down and down and down until 1897, the British troops plunder Benin. That's how we get all of the stolen treasures of Benin, the Benin bronzes and all of those things. Okay. 1904, Herero uprising in Southwest Africa. 1957, the Gold Coast becomes independent Ghana, and other countries follow suit. And you know what went off in my mind? I said, well, 1957, somebody was asking the question, well, why didn't the other African nations come, and why didn't they come help us? Well, they're being attacked too at the same time. They're being plundered too at the same time. They don't, one nation becomes independent in 1957. One, Ghana. Then the other African countries follow suit. So we're in a boat of trauma and colonization and tyranny, and they too were in a boat. So how they helping us when they dealing with their own fights? Just saying. Just saying. All right. So sometimes I think we're upset at the wrong thing or at the wrong people. And I know I've gone a long time, but I felt like this was necessary to talk about, necessary to provide some resources for you to go read and search and research for yourself, to provide peer reviewed resources where other people have looked at the work, read the work, checked the work, verified the work, and it's not just you looking at random YouTube videos and swearing that you know everything there is to know about this topic. I don't know everything I need to know about this topic, and I've been in education for almost 25 years. And I'm still learning, I'm still growing, I'm still searching things out. And I tell anybody, when you're studying and you learn something new, you learn a new fact, you learn a new truth, you learn something that, you know, pushes up against what you thought you knew about the subject, you have the right to change your mind. You have the right to say, okay, I update what I know, I update my facts, and I reserve the right to change my mind. Okay? All right. So, what I'm going to do at the end of this, I'm going to take a picture of all of the books. Um, I may have to put it in two pictures, and then I will post those pictures underneath this live, and then I'll also post them as a separate post for you all to take a look at. Okay? I am definitely going to post the pictures. I'm going to set them all out flat, take some pictures of them, and post it underneath this video. And then I'll also post it as a separate post on Black Table Talk. So if you want to look more in detail at the books to order them, feel free to do so. These are books that I have ordered in the last year, and I know some of them, especially if you're trying to get used copies, some of them they still have some used copies of them, but some of them may be out of stock, and you may have to go for a brand new copy. All right. This has been Teachable Tuesday, and I hope that you have learned something today that you did not know. Um, and as always, when you're researching, because I was a librarian for a school, a private school for 5 years, and I was also a research assistant librarian for a high school for 3 years. With anything I have learned, when you are searching for subject material, sometimes you can find a little bit more in depth facts in the older publication than you can in some of the newer publications. Sometimes, again, people are just chopping up history. And so you might need to go back to an older publication to get what you saw today, which was that full timeline. So that's one of the things that's good about getting an older publication. Sometimes the timelines are a little bit more detailed than what you're going to find in the contemporary books. Okay? Okay. I want to thank you again for your time and attention today. This has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I've been your host today, Shantae Charles. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness, so continue to go out and be light. Take care, everyone. Be well, and most importantly, be light.